Hey guys, so in today's video, I'm going to be going through my step-by-step process on how exactly I do my initial screening or initial analysis of property listings that are available on realestate.com. Today is specifically going to be around Bendigo, just because Bendigo has been a real, hot spot over the past 9 to 12 months. It's had some really strong growth when it comes to property prices around the area, but also just generally demand is really high and supply is shrinking literally on a weekly basis. Now, the reason for these types of videos is to essentially build a really strong foundation of quickly screening properties to figure out if it's actually worth you spending your time on. At any given time, there's going to be potentially tens, if not hundreds of property listings that are available. And to be honest, the vast majority of those properties are going to be a complete waste of time and not worth you investing the effort to look into further. Whether it's initial red flags of being on a main road or being in a flood zone or having just generally being a really poor condition property that's going to require a lot of incoming maintenance to repair the property, potentially do restumping, potentially fixing some structural issues, or having to do some sort of cosmetic renovation when you don't really have the funds to do so. So essentially what we want to do is set up a precedence of, these are some key factors that we need to consider that are non-negotiables. If these properties or if this property fails against any of these one sort of metrics, then immediately, you reject the property. So I know the process of trying to find an investment property can be really time consuming, and especially when you lose out on properties, it can be really demotivating. So why not just skip all of that and just come up with a really small handful of your top picks and just spending all your time on those specific properties rather than sending inquiries on every single property spending 5 minutes on a phone call with every real estate agent on every property within a particular location is just a complete waste of time. And especially because there are new properties that pop up literally on a daily basis, you really only want to pick a couple of properties whenever you do this type of search. Now, personally, I'm in search for my next investment property. Bendigo is one of those locations that I'm currently considering. And so this is literally how I would go about searching for that next investment property in Bendigo. Now, let's just do a quick of a bit of a quick sort of summary on Bendigo as a whole. So Bendigo is a regional Victorian city. It's got a rough population of about 120,000 people. So definitely by no means a small city. 120,000 people is very sizable. And population growth in this location is looking to be really strong. There's a bunch of residential development happening out in the outskirts of the city. So typically what you would want to avoid is purchasing property anywhere near these sorts of massive land subdivision developments. Now, because I've already been searching in Bendigo, I can just immediately sort of highlight some of those locations. If we sort of zoom in a little bit, Bendigo CBD is right over here. There is a train line that essentially runs through just along here, which goes all the way up through White Hills, through Epsom and Ascot, and past Huntley as well, stretching all the way down through Golden Square, and then Kangaroo Flats, which basically leads into Melbourne. So if we zoom out a little bit, you can see that essentially Melbourne is over here. I do live in Melbourne, so I apologize for all of my restaurant saved check marks. We'll just kind of ignore that for now. But anyway, so Bendigo is a really diverse industry or economy. It's become a investor's hotspot for a really good reason. And so, we're definitely considering this in our own or my own personal search. So immediately just off the bat, there are some locations that I would probably not even consider looking into. Now, it's mainly going to be locations on the outskirts or where there's a lot of potential supply concerns. So if we look into areas like Maiden Gully, for example, now there's no real immediate, supply concern. A lot of these properties are on really large, plots of land. They're probably going to be quite expensive as well. But it is a little bit further out from, the wider Bendigo metro area than you would prefer, to be honest. There's a lot of land in between Maiden Gully and Long Gully, for example, that is already starting to show signs of residential, developments. As you can see, there's been roads built out. This is probably going to be residential developments. And so you can see that in the next 10, 20 years, this is, potentially going to be further developed out. There's already some sort of existing areas like this. So typically Maiden Gully is probably not going to be a location that I would really consider. Similarly with this suburb called Strathfields A, or Genorton. I've absolutely butchered those names, but in any case, you can see that there is a lot of properties that are on sizable blocks of land. They're probably, really nice properties, but overall, it's probably not going to be super affordable to find a property here. It's a bit further out than some of the more livable areas within Bendigo, and so typically I would probably avoid purchasing in this region as well. There's quite a bit of residential development going on, and some that has already happened, where you can see these properties are actually built fairly nicely. There's a good amount of space between the roofs of each of the properties, which is better than what you can say for some of those other cookie cutter land subdivision developments that you see in capital cities. But in any case, locations such as Kangaroo Flat is actually a really good investable location. Now, going against what I was just talking about, being on the sort of outskirts or on the edges of the main metro area, Kangaroo Flat is actually a very well developed out location. So you've got a major shopping center being Lansdale Square over here. You've also got its own train station over here. So you've got the V line, which basically goes straight into Melbourne. Will literally take you about an hour and a bit. And overall, it's just a very, diverse and spread out sort of location. Now, some particular pockets within this you probably want to typically avoid, especially like the very bottom. But anywhere from Lansdale Square and above is a really good game. Some locations such as Eagle Hawk is really good. California Gully is really good. Long Gully is good, but it is a smaller suburb. A lot of it is commercial, and it does have a fairly high public housing percentage. Locations such as Epsom, Ascot, going up to Huntley are quickly developing out. So Epsom I would probably still consider. There's some developable land left over, but a lot of Epsom has actually already been fully developed. So unless they go through the process of clearing out some of these trees, there's not going to be a whole lot of new development coming through. I definitely can't say the same for Huntley though. So Huntley up here is going through some very, very significant, residential land subdivision development. So you can even see here that roads are already being built, or additional roads are being built. These are the types of properties that are going to pop up. And not to say that these properties are bad or anything. I'm simply concerned about this location from a supply perspective. If you've got, hundreds of properties, like if you look at this land size, this empty land size, this land size over here, you've literally got hundreds of properties that are about to be built, if not undergoing construction currently, which is going to put a lot of extra supply into this particular region. And so if you are one of, potentially hundreds of properties that are just popping up, and yours is a little bit older than some of these newer ones, you're going to have a bit more of a difficult time potentially selling your property in the future. But overall, it's just if you've constantly got properties popping up all around you, that's just going to be a recipe for disaster. Cool. So obviously there are certain pockets within Bendigo that you would typically avoid. And so I've sort of already outlined some of those The next step in the process would be to essentially go on realestate.com. We'll literally search up Bendigo, Bendigo greater region. Sure, we'll include the surrounding, actually, let's not include the surrounding areas. Let's only look at houses at this point, because again, this is essentially me walking you through my own property search. Price point, I'm looking for anything from, let's say, 450K up to 600,000. Now, not to say that buying properties above this range isn't good. There's definitely a lot of properties above the 600K price point that actually are really good value. This is just a personal thing. I've only got pre-approval up to a $600,000 purchase price, so I'm not even going to entertain anything above that at this point. Bedrooms, I want at least 3 bedrooms. Bathrooms, at least 1 bathroom. And then land size, I want at least, and this is more arbitrary. This is only in the interest of reducing the search down as much as possible. Now, I only want to look at established properties because newer properties generally are situated in newer suburbs when you're looking at regional locations. And so, I want to just completely avoid the supply concern on that front. Now, I do want to exclude properties that are currently under contract or currently under offer because there is no point wasting your time going through all of that. And we will look at things on a map filter. So, Bendigo as a whole, we don't actually have too many properties to look at, which is actually a good thing. Immediately, I want to avoid Sailors Gully. It's a bit too far on the outskirts. We've got, let me just check this again. Minimum 400 square meters. Okay, cool. Now, immediately, I'm just going to hover over some properties and just quickly look at them. This looks pretty decent. I'll dig into that a little bit more. This is a 4-bed, 2-bath. It's a really dated property. It's in original condition, but it's got potential at this price point. Over here, we have a 4-bed, 4-bathroom property that I'm probably going to reject, but let's look into it. Now, immediately, I would sort of just disregard this property because the price point is already above my range, and it is a 3-bed, 1-bath. So even if this was on like 1,200 square meters of land, it's not really something that I would actually consider. You've got this property on Eagle Hawk Road, which is a main road. It's also a fairly dated property, but the condition is really good. Price point is not bad given the condition, so I'll look into that. Gordon Square, we've got another fairly original property. Honestly, I'll probably skip this one. Reason being, just looking at these photos, the kitchen is completely original. Carpets and wallpaper is not a big deal. Like, I would, actually welcome some of those cosmetic renovations. But the weatherboard already over here, actually, I'll just open it up so I can walk through it with you guys. So we've got enough. Now, next step is we just go through the properties one by one, essentially. So this property over here at 6 Campbell Street, first thing we'll look at is the just general condition of the property. So you can see that the property is of some sort of fibro construction in terms of its cladding. So the walls on the outside, this side at least is fibro. There's some weatherboard on the side over there. It honestly doesn't have the most beautiful street frontage. I wouldn't walk past this property and stop or look back, for example. You can just sort of gauge the general condition of the property as well. It is quite dated. There is probably some maintenance required on the property from a structural perspective. So already this is looking like a bit more work than it's actually worth. Look, price is great. Which is honestly, the price is fair. But I honestly probably would not consider this property at all. So I'm not even going to dig into this any further. Already, this is not looking like a property that I would be confident holding for the next 10, 15 years. And so I'm going to delete that. Next is number 6, Davidson Street, North Bendigo. 4-bed, 2-bath, 2 parking, 740 square meters of land. Really good price range, which already is raising some question marks. Why is this property so cheap? Now, going into some of the photos, these photos already look like they weren't taken recently. We'll take it with a grain of salt, but it is essentially a weatherboard construction property. Looks like it's built on slab, so not on sort of stumps in terms of its foundations. Colorbond roofing, which is good. Again, not the prettiest property. Old sort of fuzzy carpets. Very original property just all throughout. Now, floor plan is fine. I have no problems with this floor plan. The 4th bedroom doesn't have a walk-in robe. Sorry, doesn't have a built-in robe, but that's not the end of the world. Overall, it's honestly, like, for the price, it's not a bad property. I would definitely dig into this a little bit further. So next sort of step in the process is checking this on a Google Maps search. So diving into this, we are essentially on Davidson Street. Next door to us is a nursing home, which isn't the worst thing, but it's also not great. Now, next thing is going to VIC Plan. VIC Plan is a website that you can use to essentially look at the zoning in any particular, for any particular property within Victoria. So as you can see, it's a triangle-shaped lot, which is not great. You've got a public park zoning behind the property, which is insignificant. But overall, there's no flood zoning, there's no bushfire zoning, besides the fact that the block is a really strange shape and it's not regular. Zoning is okay. Next thing that I would look into is public housing. So OpenStats does give you sort of these pockets of particular suburbs to just check the public housing percentage. A super quick search. What you would see here is that the public housing percentage is about 7.5%. 34% are rental properties, and then about 60% are owner-occupied properties. Now, given that this is a very small pocket for residential property, as you can see, the only residential properties are literally in this pocket and up here. The rest of it is a reserve or it's commercial facilities. What this tells me is that, about 7% of the properties literally on this street are public housing properties. Which again isn't the end of the world. I would still consider this property, even after going through all of that information, I would consider this worth further investigation, purely because of the price point. Because it is a 4-bed, 2-bath, your rental return on this property is going to be quite high, despite the fact that it's in original condition. This type of property is definitely worth doing some cosmetic upgrades on. What you could do is literally look into replacing the carpets throughout the property and potentially doing an internal repaint, replacing the blinds. This bathroom is in perfectly fine condition. Potentially doing some upgrades to the kitchen, maybe adding some additional cabinetry, adding a range hood, and then obviously still replacing the carpets, maybe do an internal repaint. But fairly inexpensive cosmetic renovation. I would say if you were keen to put in maybe $20,000 into this renovation, you would turn this into a property that's potentially worth upwards of $600,000. So this is worth considering. We'll move on to the next one. Number 6, Inglewood Street, Golden Square. It's a 4-bed, 1 study, 4 bathroom, 4 parking space on 840 square meters of land at $570K. The price has been reduced. Now, what you'll want to know is why the price has been reduced. And one possible reason is because this property is being sold directly by the homeowner. So they're not a real estate agent. They don't know the tricks of the trade to, run a property sale. And so you can kind of infer from the photos that this owner is probably an investor themselves. Now, this does look like a dual occupancy type of property. So you've got 3 separate bedrooms, and then you've likely got an additional bedroom in the bungalow and an additional bathroom in the bungalow. I don't know how he's come up with 4 bed, 1 study, 4 bathroom. Immediately, this is a red flag. I am not really going to consider touching this any further. Looking at a street view of it, it's, not worth it. Let's skip that one. Number 37, Eaglehawk Road in Ironbark. So 3 bed, 1 bath, 500 square meters, around the mid-5s price range. One concern that I had was around the fact that it is on a main road. And this is a pretty big red flag. This is the house. You've got a commercial property medical clinic right next door. And you've got a very main road that the property is situated on. Purely based on the fact that it's on a main road and it has essentially 4 lanes of road. Actually, it even goes into 6 lanes. This is very clearly quite a busy road. And so from a future saleability perspective, in terms of the future buyer pool of who would want to purchase this property is going to be very, very limited. My thoughts on this property itself, though, is that, look, it is a good property. It is a character home. This is a very old property and it's been very well maintained. Internals look great. It's very unique. But it does have some pretty big concerns when it comes to the particular street that it's on. But immediately I would just reject this. Not worth it. 18 Ophir Street in Golden Square, 3 bed, 1 bath, 700 square meters, 5 to 550. Initial photos look pretty good. There's some wood rot to the fascias on the roof, but that's not a huge concern. It's on its own sort of private road over here. Location is really good. It's really close to the CBD. Just up here. I really like this location. Let's go into the property specifics. So immediately you can tell that the brick wall over here, the brick retaining wall is falling apart, which is a little bit concerning. Property is quite dated. Internals look pretty average. But even look, like this structure is completely uninhabitable. I don't even think it's probably like a shed or something. Weatherboard is damaged and does need maintenance. The door frames and everything is basically falling apart. This property looks like it does need a whole lot of maintenance. Roof is probably like minimum 50 years old. Needs a new roof. But look, the location's really good. Despite that, I am just going to reject this right off the bat. 18 Hollow Street in Golden Square, 4 bed, 2 bath, 700 square meters. Now this is above my price range, but it does look like a very solid property. So this is a single story brick construction. It's definitely on some sort of stumps in terms of the foundations, as you can see by the vents over here. But it does look quite solid. Now, this does give pretty shifty vibes as well, not going to lie. It has obviously been renovated at some point, so this cabinetry is all fairly new. Floorboards are in decent condition as well. Looks like original floorboards, probably does need a sanding. But this property has been renovated at some point. It's had a paint job done. Probably needs another paint job, to be honest, but bathroom looks okay. Honestly, I don't love it. Look, I'm spending too much time on this one. Let's just move on to the next. Number 12, Ewing Court in Flora Hill, 3-bed, 1-bath, 1,100 square meters. That's probably why the price point is so much higher for just a 3-bed, 1-bath. Now, looking at this property, it is a really good construction, brick, concrete tiled roofing. It's probably built on stumps though. Internal condition is basically original, but it's decent. It's original, but it's decent. So this is the type of property that you could just chuck in maybe 10 grand, 15 grand worth of cosmetic renovations, especially with some new carpets and maybe some new ceiling fans, maybe a fresh coat of paint. Bathroom at some point will need a full renovation, but it's serviceable. And very clearly the backyard is massive. Now, the problem with this property specifically is that despite the land size being so big, this land size isn't actually in any shape or form usable, because what an investor might potentially want to do with the extra land size is, maybe build a granny flat or something, or, maybe subdivide and build a separate property. But there's no separate access for this property. If we look at the front photo, there's no access around the side of the property. You've got a carport over here, which technically you could knock down, and that would make it more viable. But it's a super, super irregular land size or land shape. And so there's no point really even considering it as a potential value add opportunity. Finally, we've got 23 Button Street in Strathdale, Victoria, 4-bed, 2-bath, 830 square meters, $600,000. This looks pretty good. Now, there's a few things to say about this property. So, structurally, the property is probably in really good. It appears to be double bricked in some areas, but overall, I don't really have issues with the structure. It's been painted over. One thing that I am concerned about is the roof, though. So if we go through this photo over here, you can see that there is quite a lot of buildup of organic material on the roof. Now, over time, that's actually going to corrode the roof and basically start causing leaks. The cause of that is obviously just the overhanging trees. Over years and years, it's just going to cause a buildup of leaves, which are acidic, especially when they decompose. That's going to cause a lot of rusting over time. And so this roof probably does need to be replaced, which already, just looking at it, is probably going to be about a $20,000-$30,000 job, especially when you have to remove these solar panels and reinstall the solar panels. It's already looking like a bit of a job. But overall, I actually quite like the structure of the property. So entry via this section over here, and immediately you've got, your bedroom sort of section. So bedroom 2, bedroom 1, which is the main bedroom with a walk-in robe and an ensuite. You've got bedroom 3 and 4, both with built-in robes, separate bathroom, separate toilet, separate laundry. And then you've got a sort of living section with a kitchen, sort of like a dining area, more living space. Then you've got a double garage. So look, the property itself is quite good. I would still consider this. I think it would be very, very necessary to do a building and pest inspection, especially for the roof side of things. But, looking into the property itself, we might do a bit of a zoning search just to check off some boxes. No issues from a zoning perspective. Public housing, I wouldn't imagine there would be any issues. Okay, cool. So in this particular pocket, there is 0% public housing. Obviously, in the pocket next door, you've got 16% public housing. The pocket underneath, you've got 18% public housing, but that's really just this bottom section. Then you've got 10%, but you've also got 0%, 0%, 0%, 5%. I have no issues with the public housing around the area, as long as I know in the immediate vicinity there are no public housing properties on this street. So this is something that I would look into as well. Now, that's kind of it, guys. So basically, out of those 8 properties, there are only 2 properties that I would look further into. Obviously, there are going to be, concerns with both of these from like a structural perspective, potentially. This one, I want to understand what it's built on. Is this built on stumps or is it built on slab? If it's built on slab, I've got a lot more confidence with the property. And then it's more so just the trade-off between, okay, this particular pocket is across the road from a nursing home. There's quite a lot of trees around, but it's going to be a fairly quiet street. It's fairly central. You're fairly close to Bendigo CBD. Price point looks really good. You'd probably just want a little bit more information to work off of. Similarly with this one, which we just went through, my only real concern with this one is about the roof. You would want a walkthrough video of this property for sure. You would want a walkthrough video of every property. Just basically assessing if there's any water damage in the ceilings. Are there any structural concerns with this property? Kitchen looks perfectly serviceable. It is definitely dated, but it's perfectly serviceable. This property would probably benefit hugely from a cosmetic renovation. You would definitely want to tidy up the yard on this one. Remove a lot of, these random trees and shrubbery and just clean the whole place up, essentially. This has been a really long video, so apologies for that, guys, but I hope you got something out of this video and to just basically assess what to spend your time on and what not to spend your time on, right? It's really important that we are efficient with these things because it can be very demoralizing just putting so much time into searching for, or gathering information, jumping on the phone, talking to a property manager to try and get a better indication of the particular pocket. It's really demoralizing when you fail, despite spending so much time on it. But if you're just super efficient, I've spent, the past 45 minutes going through 8 separate properties and I've essentially searched the entire city, right? Obviously, I'll probably do this on a number of different cities at the same time. If I don't need to talk through it, it will probably literally take me about 10 minutes to do. But it's just sort of explaining some of the specific things about any particular property that just catch my attention. I think or I at least hope is going to be useful for you guys to sort of gain a little bit more perspective. Anyways, thank you guys so much. I will catch you in the next one and we'll do a couple more of these in some of the other locations that I'm currently searching for my next investment property on.